Yes,
government, yeah.
Lolo, I called you. Why are you not answering?
Thank you. I'm looking for them. I'm looking for my eyes.
No.
They say take your. That's your souvenir.
Oh, my souvenir, yeah.
Souvenir. Thank you. Especially this one.
Yes.
Especially this one.
Especially this one.
Especially this one. It's a real souvenir.
Souvenir, Gabriel.
Which one?
So how do we do?
It's a real
Do we
souvenir.
read a statement
The
first?
first
or
presidential summit, right?
we give a statement first?
Yeah, give a statement.
What do you want to do? So, Taron, you will be able to guide us.
Taran, how do you do
How
it?
do
You
we
want
do
us to
Read
go ahead with
or
it?
what?
maybe highlight.
They've
talk
got it
about-
already, right?
Yeah.
So they can just ask questions for it.
Now, what
Oh,
you do,
for
you do an
opening.
introduction. An introduction to say we're going to, and you can highlight maybe just broadly summary of what it's all about.
Okay. Anika, the Tutuzela centers and sexual
They
offense.
can hear you.
Where are they?
Yeah, there was an extra hard copy. Where is it?
Not this one.
Here we go. Monica?
Parents.
Yes, so that she can do the work. You have 58% of your young people.
They can hear you.
And bazokubamba inkunzi lokushiya.
We're ready.
No, I'm okay, Taron. That's okay. That's okay.
Ready? You can start.
I think we're ready.
Yeah. We're ready for you, Taron. She'll come in.
give her a minute to get back. No, I'm saying you
Oh,
should give her a minute.
all right.
to
I
get
thought
back.
you wanted me to.
Oh, no.
I think you can start.
Yeah,
then.
we can say.
Yeah.
Can we start?
Yes, please.
Good afternoon. Order. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the media, as well as some summit delegates who have joined us here this afternoon. Thank you for your patience with us. But we are here now to report back on the resolutions of this first presidential summit on gender-based violence and femicide. The panel who will be briefing you will be headed by the Minister of Social Development, Ms. Susan Shabangu. And then on my far left, we have Advocate Praise Kambula of the Department of Justice. Next to the Minister is Dr. Olive Shisana, who is Special Advisor on Social Policy to President Cyril Ramaphosa. Right next to me is Advocate Brenda Madumise of the Total Shutdown Movement, as well as her comrade and partner, Ms. Onika Makwakwa of Total Shutdown. Welcome to our panelists and welcome to all of you. I think I will just ask Dr. Olive to start the briefing for us.
First, let me thank you, all of you, for coming. We know it's late, it's Friday evening, you'd rather be somewhere else, and we appreciate the fact that you stayed here until the end. What we want to share with you is a declaration of this presidential summit against gender-based violence and femicide. We had more than 1,200 delegates that came to this summit. And the reason they came here is that they were all concerned about the question of gender-based violence in South Africa. They came from many parts of the country, from the urban areas, from rural areas, from all provinces, people of all sexual orientations and gender identities, people with disabilities, migrant women, and women living with HIV. All of those who have experienced gender-based violence also were able to be here. At this particular summit, we noted that it's important to include all the sectors, that there is no one sector that will be able to address the challenges of gender-based violence. So for that reason, we made it a point that we have the sectors that deal specifically with children, with older persons or persons with disabilities, migrants, LGBTQI, academia, labor, business, media, development agencies, government, and other relevant structures. So this summit is essentially the outcome of mobilizing efforts by many women. They've marched around the country on the 1st of August, and they continue to raise their concerns and gave us a memorandum which required that we should have address about 24 demands. And those 24 demands really featured prominently in many of the discussions that were held here at the summit. Women were deeply concerned about the extent of gender-based violence and femicide in our country. They were concerned that the rate of femicide in South Africa is reported to be among the highest in the world. And the population studies did show that about a quarter of men reported rape, and data from women showed between 25 and 40% experienced physical violence as well as sexual violence. So they were concerned that there were also hate crimes that were not addressed in our country. And also there was a feeling that, the realization of the prosperous and vibrant democracy can be deeply compromised if we're not really addressing this issue of gender, because it affects half of the population of South Africa, that is the women. And it affects all levels of society. It affects the women, girls, children, non-gender conforming individuals, as well as people with disabilities and who become also primary victims. So recognizing all of that, we looked at the situation of the country in terms of the law. We know we've got a very good constitution that is addressing many of the concerns that we actually have. And we have many laws that are there. Unfortunately, those laws were actually not being implemented in order to reduce or to end gender-based violence and the needs of the vulnerable groups. So we felt that there was a need for us to reaffirm our commitment to a united, comprehensive, and effective response to gender-based violence and femicide, and we should do this together. For that reason, we did endorse what the President has said. He called for all South Africans to respond to gender-based violence and femicide, inclusive of the needs of people with disabilities, as well as the gender non-conforming people. We agreed that we should actually ensure that we establish a multi-sectoral coordinating structure that is going to respond to gender-based violence and femicide, as well as to allocate necessary and adequate resources required in order to develop a gender-based violence and femicide strategy. The summit appreciated the President's pledge to listen to the women of South Africa and respond with the agency that's required. The summit therefore resolved that they should all work together collaboratively so that they can eradicate gender-based violence and femicide. And they committed themselves to the following areas. One is that political and community leadership must support and champion the cause of eradicating gender-based violence and femicide. Number two, that political, community, family, and business leadership should be held accountable through, amongst others, a code of conduct. Three, immediately set up an interim structure which is funded with the eventual objective of establishing a national multi-stakeholder council. The composition of the council must be inclusive and representative with consideration of at least 51% civil society, and appointments must be transparent. The interim structure should establish a functional council and should do so within 6 months, and the President should champion it, and adequate resourcing should be in place for its optimal functioning. Subsequently, legislation will be drafted which is going to govern its operations. Number four, a national strategic plan on gender-based violence and femicide should be developed within the next 6 months, and this national strategic plan should be resourced, implemented, and monitored, as well as evaluated on a regular basis. Number five, it should ensure that all the laws and policies, programs, and interventions are adequately planned, costed, and resourced in line with the gender-responsive planning, budgeting, and monitoring evaluation framework across all government departments. Number six, we must retain, resource, strengthen, and reinvigorate the institutional mechanisms, including the national gender machinery. Number seven, promote women-centered economic development. Number eight, continuously strengthen the information and research base to develop effective, coordinated, evidence-based policy and programming. Number nine, there must be a targeted social behavior change program to address patriarchal values and norms, as well as structural drivers of gender-based violence, and it must be implemented. This should be targeted to all sectors, including individuals, families, communities, civil servants, religious and traditional leaders, the private sector, the media, and others who are strategically placed to influence attitudes, behavior, and practices that are supported by, but should be supported by an effective resourced communication strategy. Number 10, we should evaluate existing education interventions with a view to strengthen them to ensure a comprehensive response at all levels of education. Number 11, convene a meeting of all communicators on Gender-Based Violence to adopt ethical guidelines to cover language used, approaches for sensitivity, particularly with regard to the social media package, as well as the social context training for the media sector. Number 12, ensure service optimization through ongoing capacity building, specialization, strengthening coordination informed by legislation, by norms, standards, and protocols on gender-based violence. Number 13, fast-track the review of existing laws and policies on gender-based violence to be victim-centered and ensure all the relevant laws respond to gender-based violence. Number 14, implement the recommendations that have been identified from reviews and address some legislative gaps that have been identified. Number 15, consider creating a regulatory framework for religious institutions to curb sexual abuses and crimes under the guises of religion. And finally, number 16, revisit and fast-track all outstanding laws and bills that relate to gender-based violence and femicide, including the discrimination of sex work. This is the agreement that has been reached, and we are pleased to present it, to the media and to the nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shisona.
Yes.
Thank you, colleagues in the media. We'll now open to questions, and the panel will be free to deal with those questions or make comments as it pleases them. Thank you.
And you all can take questions.
They can indicate.
There's a hand.
Got a hand over there. Afternoon.
I'm Masako from ENCA. I just wanted to find out, has this document been signed by all parties? I know that this is the stuff that you discussed and those are all the pointers, but has this summit basically collapsed? Has it been concluded? Is it signed by all parties that are supposed to sign it?
Let the minister answer.
It's Thando Kupeka from Eyewitness News. So my question is about how government is going to ensure that what has come out of this summit materializes. I mean, it's all good and well that we have a nice outcome and write all these things we'd like to happen. But are there any structures that are you going to put in place in order to monitor the progress, whether the stuff that you guys have set out to do are actually happening? And maybe are you going to let us know on the progress on a later stage so we can also know as the public?
Thanks, Thando. One more question in this round.
Thank you very much. The question asked by Masiko. Masiko, the summit has adopted the declaration. And I think what you need to understand in a gathering of 1,200 people, 400 organizations, civil society, which were part of this process, everybody with amendment to the declaration, it has been adopted. Because signing don't translate to adoption. It becomes also important that when it gets signed by the relevant stakeholders, it will be a much more better document, which then will be distributed to everybody. But what we are pleased with as government is that it has been adopted. There were amendments if you were part of the process. There were amendments made and factored in, so they are here as we speak and adopted. You saw people clapping hands. So we are satisfied that it is a binding document to all those who participated. And on the issue, Thando, which you're raising about whether government will implement, I think what we need to understand is the historical nature of this summit. It's not just government. It's a commitment of government together with civil society or all the people who participated today who are committing to advancing the interest of gender-based violence, and how they've committed themselves is by making sure that there's a concrete agreement of immediate formulation of a structure, which then will be the one, a multisectoral structure, which will drive the process. And if you look at the declaration, it talks about within 6 months, and immediate, that structure should be there as an interim structure. Therefore, it's not government alone which has to make sure that the process is implemented, or the outcome and the declaration is going to be implemented. It's about everybody who participated, ensuring that the structure is going to happen, and as government, we are committed. And what we are going to do as government, the first thing we're going to do is to make sure that we convene people in realizing that and ensuring that the steering committee can advance in shaping the outcome of the declaration, on making sure that it's being realized. But not only that, also providing resources, because if you don't have resources, you will not be able to achieve anything. So that's what government is committing, that its role will be to make sure that it creates a mechanism for the structure itself to be viable and effective in meeting its mandate, as done today through this summit.
Just building on what is being said, I think it's, yeah, oh, sorry. Our push as civil society was that we walk out of this summit proud of the work that we have done for the 2 days, that we can face South African women and say to them, this document is going to be a reality. It has been hard to get to where we got, even finalizing this document. But because we believe in the collaborative nature of the relationship that exists between civil society and government, is that we are going to continue to agitate and advocate for changes. We're not going to stop, right? At all times, we're going to ensure that if we have taken a decision as civil society at this summit, that that interim structure is going to be in place, is going to be resourced. Because we have said, this is an emergency, it's a crisis. So the emergency and the crisis can't wait for 6 months, right? It happens immediately.
Thank you, Advocate.
From ENCA. Minister, I heard you say that yes, the declaration has been adopted, and although not all stakeholders have signed, it doesn't mean that the declaration has not been adopted. I understand that, but where to from here? Seemingly, nothing has really concluded. There's something in the air. What's the way forward now? Are all the stakeholders going to eventually sign? What needs to happen for the stakeholders to sign?
Masiko, conventions of summits, conferences. When a conference or a summit adopts a document, it's binding on the parties who are involved in that. So we can't say because there's no signature, therefore the document doesn't work. And the document, as my colleague Brenda indicated, what now is being adopted, it's about implementation with immediate effect. Because when you talk about signing, it means we want to make it beautiful and all that. So we can't wait for the signing. Because the conference, the whole delegation of people representing various organizations have adopted it. If it was not adopted, then we'd be talking of something else. So the adoption, it's a confirmation that this is a working document which is going to be used. Until such time, maybe we gather together in this particular fashion. So we are confident that even if there are no signatures of the various stakeholders, but it is binding because 1,200 people, 400 civil society organizations ensured that it's accepted and adopted. And if you had followed throughout, it was adopted and agreed to with amendments which we have factored them in. And so where we are, we have a working document which we are satisfied it's our guideline in moving forward in the implementation and meeting the demands of the people. It's not signatures which must implement. It's the agreement which stands in front of us, which we have adopted, which becomes critical. So we have adopted, we are satisfied as government, and as the parties, we are happy that we have endorsed the document. That's what is very important for us.
Okay, can I just add to what the minister has said, Matseho, is to say that we have a summit steering committee, and the declaration, the summit declaration, is still within the mandate of the steering committee. So moving forward, this is the steering committee first before I can get to the way forward. It's a steering committee that is multi-sectoral in terms of its representation. So moving forward, it's gonna be the responsibility of the steering committee to ensure that the document is what we would like to have it to be for signature purposes. It must be a clean document that because we are now in agreement of the content, but now we have to make it clean and sign it.
Okay. My question is to Church Samuel again. Is civil society entirely happy with the outcome of the conference, of the resolutions? And how are you guys going to work with government? Because they're going to support the resources and all of that. But how are you guys then going to work with them to ensure that the outcomes or the resolutions are then realized?
One, we have been participating in the steering committee process. So we've been part of the planning of this summit, right? As Advocate Kambule has indicated, that steering committee is going to continue to ensure that this becomes a reality. But doesn't take away the fact that our role is to ensure that all that has been agreed upon, the government itself does what it has undertaken, right? And by the way, the undertaking is not just to government, it's to all of us, because it's all about the entire society marshalling its resources and dedication to eradicating the scourge of violence against women and femicide. So it's really that all of us must put time and effort to ensure that what we have put here as a declaration becomes a reality, because it affects all of us on a daily basis. So at any given time, when we think that things are not happening as they're supposed to happen, we will push, we will agitate, we will advocate for changes to happen. And I think government is fully aware that they have a different set of activists in this space who are not scared and who are at a point where they believe that it cannot be business as usual with gender-based violence and femicide. That's why the urgency and declaring it a crisis.
Maybe I can add to say that I've had the pleasure of working with the civil society, and I've allowed them to really express themselves the way they want to express themselves. Within government, we have not really muzzled them to say, you can't do this, you can't do that. We've allowed them to do that. And it's because of their activism that we are here today. So we are listening to what the civil society is saying. And we look forward to continue to work with them. Even if we have difficult issues, we've got ways of dealing with difficult issues, because the issues we're dealing with are not easy. I mean, you are talking about the gender-based violence that's occurring within the homes, that's occurring in the work setting, they're occurring in the community, and so forth. So it's not occurring in government. Let's say it that way. It's not occurring in government. It may occur in the workplace, within government, but it's not something that, when you talk about intimate partner violence, it's not something that's occurring within government. But government has got the responsibility of ensuring that society protects the women, of ensuring that families protect the women, of ensuring that media, the way it portrays, women, it portrays them correctly. Government has got the responsibility to communicate messages out there to ensure that the women are safe. And if we're not doing our work, it's within the right of the civil society to stand up and say, you are not doing what it is that we required. And it's also for us to say to civil society, if they are not doing their work, you are not doing your work. You need to do our work, because it is a partnership here. This is not a one-way street. It is a partnership that we have actually established, and we look forward to continuing to work together.
Thank you, Professor. We'll invite the last round of questions.
Yeah, is there a question? There?
At this point.
Hello, I'm Jen Richard from the Land Guardian. The National Development Plan is meant to be developed within the next 6 months. What happens if that doesn't happen? I know you said that civil society and government is you're both committed to this, but what happens if you don't make the deadline? Is there a consequence?
Not true.
Minister is going to respond.
I'm one person who's always positive. When you say something, you must implement. That's the first thing which I just want to say as government. We can't afford this process to collapse or not to happen. You must also bear in mind, whilst we talk of government, we are women. We are people. We've got families. And what we are representing here, we're representing a society which is hurt. Before we become ministers, we are mothers. We've got sisters. That's a point of departure. So all of us, what brings us to here today is that anxiety. We can't afford this to collapse. And I must also say, at least as South Africa, we have history. This is not the first time we're making history. We've done history several times. And when we commit to something, we implement. We are committed. We are very happy that the civil society is here, working together with us. And I'm happy that we have a steering committee. If there are issues, they'll have to come back and resolve and find mechanisms of addressing those. It's not going to be easy. Let's be honest. It's not going to be easy. But we expect those difficult issues to be addressed because it's in the interest of our people, especially women, in making sure that we address that. So I don't think we've budgeted for failure. We are budgeting for success. We are budgeting for the difficulties which we'll have to confront together in ensuring that we address them. So I don't want to have the ifs, because if we start having, when we have not even started to say what if it collapses, then it means we must not start. And I also want to say, we are taking responsibility as a collective. It's not government alone. And if there are problems, we must come back and say, why is it not happening? So the commitment, the many women who are here today are looking forward for us to deliver, not for the 1,200, are here to deliver for all women in South Africa who confront any form of violence in our society. So we can't afford to fail. We cannot fail. Let me tell you, we cannot fail. Together with civil society, there's no space for failure. I just wanted to say that there's no space for failure.
Yeah.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you to everyone in the media for joining us at this press conference and for covering the summit in the way you have. We appreciate your interest and support. Thank you to our panel for joining us this afternoon, and thank you very much, everyone. Have a safe weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. When you've not started.